Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, the Awaken Hub was established during the initial lockdown to support female founders. Now, as the network continues to grow, the Awaken Hub is planning to solve the investment problems which are often experienced by female entrepreneurs by creating an angel investing forum. One of the co-founders of the Awaken Hub, Sinéad Crowley, joins us now to tell us more. Sinéad, we'll be discussing Awaken Hub and how it supports female founders. But first, I'd like to get an insight into your own background.
Good morning, Carl. Thanks a million for having me. Sure. So I spent about 15 years working, Carl, in the area of kind of socio-economic development in the southwest of Ireland, and then followed by the last 12 years in the UK, predominantly working in community building, diaspora, networks and philanthropy.
Provide us with an insight into that work with the Diaspora, because I often think that it's an underutilised asset that we have here in Ireland.
It is. I suppose it's one of those things that you don't realise that you need it until you leave home. So when I moved to the UK 12 years ago, I only knew literally one Irish person. And then fast forward a decade or so, and you discover that there's a whole group of diaspora networks across the UK, many of which are actually supported by the Department of Foreign Affairs and the work that they do in helping next generation of talent that's moving out of Ireland. And they similarly support that work in the US and in other countries around the world.
So from a practical perspective, how is the Diaspora utilised in that regard?
Oh, I mean, from the very basics of people arriving off the boat, for the want of a better word, looking for jobs, people looking to develop their professional careers in terms of mentorship, and even down to things like looking for accommodation. I suppose you can fast track that whole process very quickly if you tap into one of the diaspora networks.
And having held leadership roles for 25 years, I'd be interested to hear about how the role of women in business has evolved over that period.
Some of the issues women have are in terms of getting out of their own way. So the whole imposter syndrome thing is spoken about very frequently now, and women seem to wear that almost like a crown of thorns, I suppose, and for the most part, not exclusively so, but men don't seem to experience that same thing. So that's one of them. And then also there are very practical issues which women seem to have to deal with more when it comes to things like familial responsibilities and just that kind of glass ceiling that is well documented that exists when it comes to women moving up the career ladder.
And if we look at women in business in 2022, what changes need to be made to make further progress in this area?
Generally speaking, I suppose you have to look at the whole area of diversification in terms of the workplace, more flexibility in terms of accommodating women, whether they're looking to return to work or they just need a little bit more flexibility in terms of the way that their working practices exist. And I think, again, women have to maybe also claim their seat at the table in a more proactive way.
Now, it was the first lockdown in 2020 which created the Awaken Hub. Talk to us about your co-founders and where the idea for this came from.
So there are 5 of us involved, Carl, and we've all been friends for a number of years, and we were looking to do something that would kind of leverage our connectivity and our professional networks that we'd built up over decades, and we weren't quite sure what that would look like. So we come from Derry. Claire McGee is from Derry. Mary Carty is a Roscommon woman living in Meath. Mary McKenna is a serial entrepreneur who lives between Tyrone and Donegal. I'm from Cork. And our friend Denise McQuaid, who's an advisor from Louth and lives in London. So women were approaching us during the first lockdown, which seems like a lifetime ago now, and their businesses or their professional situation was in crisis due to COVID. And we then all of a sudden realised that this was the thing we wanted to do, but we just didn't know it up until that point. So Awaken Hub was literally born in July 2020.
And it was on the 6th of July 2020 that you held your first virtual event with almost 70 attendees in Ireland and abroad. Talk to us about that particular event.
Yeah, so I suppose we wanted to kind of gauge as to whether Awaken Hub was legitimately a thing or not, and that we had a feeling that there was a demand there based on the approaches that we were getting from women for a community for them to be part of. Now, we appreciate that there is a place in society for all the fantastic networks and other organisations that exist, but our focus is specifically on women founders and in terms of levelling up their opportunity, access and connectivity and removing barriers to investment, scale and success. So we're all about changing the landscape for women founders for generations to come. And so we just decided we'd put on an online event because everyone was locked down anyway. 70 women turned up from multiple different countries, all Irish or Irish connected. And we've just moved on at a pace since then.
And how has the network developed and grown since then?
Well, we now have almost 2,000 people on our subscriber list, of which I'd say 95, if not 98% of them are women. They roughly kind of break down to about 60-ish% from the Republic of Ireland, about 30% from Northern Ireland and 10% from the rest of the world.
And how is the Awaken Hub actually supporting them?
So we organise a community event once a month. So any woman founder on the island of Ireland, North or South, or Irish connected woman abroad who wants to participate in our community events on a Tuesday evening are welcome to do that. All the information's on awakenhub.com and they're more than welcome to come along. And then in addition to that, we have a private online community that we call Awaken Club, which is targeted at women that we see as having the potential to build scalable businesses who need a little bit more hand-holding and a community of big sisters, which are company builders, innovators, investors that we've handpicked and invited into the community who offer informed advice and guidance to those women.
And what is the format of these community events?
So they're online because I suppose one of the big issues that we were seeing for women was the isolation that they were experiencing if they were looking to start out building their first business or starting out on their founder journey. And women often feel that people will say to them, well, sure, aren't you mad to be looking at giving up a good job and, taking a risk on building your own business? So they need to have that community that they can lean into, which might not exist on their doorstep. And then you also have women, for example, whether they're in Cork or Donegal, or we have people across several states in the United States and other countries who are supporting each other. So by doing that online, it allows them all to be a part of that. But we're also organising quarterly in-person meetups now as well in the 4 provinces moving forward, which will allow that kind of face-to-face element as well, which you can't. Obviously you can't beat the face-to-face interaction.
And apart from isolation, what are the other major challenges facing your members?
Lack of confidence is certainly one. Lack of access to finance is another huge one. Just over 2% is the global figure of investment in women-founded businesses, which we should all be kind of mortified about, to be honest. In fairness, the rate did raise in Ireland, I think, last year to 8 or 9% or something like that, but it's predominantly larger amounts of money into a small amount of women-founded businesses. And what we're trying to do is widen the funnel at the bottom so that we can create a much larger number of women founders who are taking that kind of first steps into their founder journey.
Talk to us about the She Generate programme. Why is it needed and what it entails?
You don't know what you don't know. So we wanted to educate women, make them better prospects in terms of their potential to build their businesses, and create the first actually All Island of Ireland programme for women founders. She Generates with the support of Rethink Ireland, Ulster Bank Northern Ireland and Pulsar Northern Ireland for the first cohort, which is now just coming to an end in June 2022. And we put together a series of tailored workshops for them. And they also had access to 50 what we call big sister sessions where they could get information on really specific topics that would help them on their founder journey.
And Sinéad, are there investment opportunities arising from the programme?
So we had 56 women from 23 counties, of 23 of the 32 counties in our first cohort. We actually almost doubled the cohort because we had 160 women apply and we simply couldn't whittle it down to any less than that based on the quality of applications. And about 23% of them are either preparing to or will be looking to seek investment over the coming period. So certainly there is an opportunity there for them to do that. The second half of our plan is a thing called Awaken Angels, which will be a women-led investment vehicle looking to invest in women-founded businesses. So we're not only trying to create the funnel of women that can potentially access investment, but we want to democratise the whole process for women so they can become more educated in what it means to be an investor and support women-founded businesses in the process.
That's a really positive initiative, I have to say, in terms of that female angel group that you're putting together. One of the bigger issues that are facing female entrepreneurs when they get to the next stage of growth in relation to the VCs is the fact that there's such a shortage of female VCs as well.
Oh, it is huge, and you're almost speaking to the wrong co-founder here, and that Mary McKenna could talk to you all day long about that as a very seasoned angel investor, and she'll often say that she's the only woman in the room, and actually the first time she was actually looking to make an angel investment as the only woman physically in the room, and the people thought she was there to serve the drinks. So, and
Wow.
that sounds like very funny, but it's not. I mean, it's laughable in its ridiculousness, I suppose. So our whole issue about democratising the process for women is if you can educate educated women about the world of investment, then they can become more sophisticated in terms of the levels of investment that they can make over time and into the future. So that's why we'd say we have to do both in order to ultimately change the landscape. You actually have to address it from both sides.
And just on that point then, Sinead, what advice have you got to female founders listening this morning that are starting on their journey to raising finance for their own enterprises?
Well, one, I'd say they need to go on to awakenhub.com and subscribe to our mailing list if they're not, and start coming along to our events and become a proactive member of the community. Like, we do like to say to people, we're not a selling shop, so we're not there for women founders to sell to each other. Not that that doesn't happen, it does, but it is about that community building piece and about that proactive piece of changing things into the future. And the second thing I would say, Carl, is that we actually have our next community event coming up on the 14th of June, which is one, a showcase for our first She Generate cohort, and two, we will be announcing that night expressions of interest for the next round of She Generate, which will be happening from September 2022.
And Sinead, finally, the old adage, if you can see it, you can be it, still rings true today. But over the course of your own career, what women have inspired you?
Well, I suppose definitely my mother, who, it's not like my mother was a doctor or a founder or anything, but she was just an incredible woman that would always say to us, if you can, that what you just said, if you can, picture this, if you can picture something, then you can be it and be fearless in terms of things that you believe in wholeheartedly. So that would definitely be one. And then if I was to look at somebody in the public domain, then I think I'd have to say Mary McAleese, for a woman who's always stood up for people who maybe have less opportunity than she had, and who always speaks so beautifully and represents our country so well.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Sinead Crowley from the Awaken Hub, and it's great to see such proactive steps being taken to support women on their respective founder journeys.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
South